people looked at Donald Trump's morality and saw presidential timber. And I guess the question is, I mean, David, I don't disagree, but if you could talk a little bit about how moral foundation is part of a functioning democracy and what we might be losing here.
Yeah, I mean, I was started the piece just asking a simple question: why are we so sad and mean? The suicide rates just hit another record high. The number of people who say they have no close personal friends has quadrupled. The depression rates are up. And, you know, I have a friend who's a nurse, and she has trouble keeping staff because the patients have become so abusive. A lot of her nurses want to leave the profession. So what's the answer to that? And there are a bunch of different answers. Social media is not helping. But I think the big one is there are certain skills in being a decent person, decent neighbor, decent parent. And there's like how to be a good conversationalist, how to ask for forgiveness and how to offer forgiveness, how to host a party so everybody feels included. And these are pretty everyday skills. I'm not talking about some heroic thing, but it's skills that I believe used to be taught in a wide variety of ways at schools, churches, synagogues, mosques, community organizations, civic organizations, union and worker organizations. It's like, here's how you do the small acts of kindness and consideration that make people feel included. And about 50 or 60 years ago, we just stopped doing that, stopped teaching those basic social and moral skills. And as a result, we treat each other often unkindly. We ghost each other. We're just not considerate as much.
You know, David, it's interesting. It's so fascinating when we have these discussions that we're talking about now. So much of it, for me, goes back to Alan Bloom's book, The Closing of the American Mind, in 1986. And at one point, and by the way, Alan Bloom, not a religious guy himself, but he said that what bound Americans together, unlike other great countries that had 3 or 4 different authors, he said for America, it was the Bible, and in government, it was the Constitution. And this bound people together with a distinct moral code, the Judeo-Christian values that we talk about so much. And he was complaining at the time that television was getting in between parents, children, and the family. Now, of course, it's accelerated so much with social media and the internet. So instead of having ancient texts and constitutions being the reality, the basis, we have this. We have a phone. Yeah. And everything comes in through this phone. This is now what tells people, you know, it provides permission structure to be rude. It provides permission structure to look at people like Donald Trump and go, oh, it's very cool how he humiliates everybody that gets in his way. I mean, talk about that. And I just must say how much we're wasting our time if we talk all around issues of like faith, civic organizations, even Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, again, Rotary clubs, these things that have bound us together culturally over the past, 100 years.
Yeah, I think the phones are important, but not the key thing. The phones are everywhere, but the emotional crisis that we have in this country is actually worse than most other places. And so I do think it's just, you stop talking about how do you become a decent person. And you can measure this. There's a thing called Google Ngrams, and they measure how much are people using words in popular conversation. And over the last 50 or 60 years, words like honor, courage, humility, bravery, all these virtue-sounding words have all plummeted. We just don't use the words. We're just not talking about it. And so, you can be pompous and moralistic, but if you went into a school 50 years ago, public school, private school, whatever, there was a sense that character formation was like our main job here. And I love quoting a guy who ran a school called the Stowe School. He said, we turn out men who are acceptable at a dance, but invaluable at a shipwreck. And what he meant by that was they're going to have some social polish, but when the chips are down, we've taught them how to show up in a time of crisis. And this is not highfalutin stuff. It's just what we're called upon to do when a friend of ours is hurting, to know how to show up, to know what to say, what not to say, how to build a friendship. And I think it's these elementary social skills that we don't teach, as we do teach what Steve Ratner was just talking about, how do I get into Harvard? And so our schools have shifted their focus from character formation is the most important thing to getting into Harvard is the most important thing.
So, David, talk to us a little bit more about how we got here. And certainly the silos of social media and being among like-minded travelers politically is part of it. Is it also some of this about in the last 30, 40 years, however long you may think, is it about a singular economic focus of people putting forth like individualism and materialism ahead of the greater community good?
Yeah, I think Americans have always been pretty individualistic and pretty materialistic. I think the thing that changed is we had an ethos, a set of ideas that our founders really believed in, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and they really believed human beings are wonderfully made, but they're all deeply broken. We're all kind of selfish. And if we're going to make a good country out of these kinds of people, we need to do this thing, which they called moral formation. And that's why they thought it had to be pervasive in the schools, pervasive in the neighborhoods. And then I would say, round about after World War II, people looked at human nature and they didn't say, oh, we're wonderfully made, but also deeply broken. They said, people are innately good. The little golden soul you have in there is just beautiful, and all you have to do is get in touch with yourself. And so if you think people are innately good, that everybody's unselfish and beautiful in a society that's corrupt, then you don't need to do moral formation because you're good. And so you can feel satisfied with whatever you want to do is good because you want to do it. And so as that abandoning the idea that we all need help, we're all basically kind of selfish, and we need help to overcome our selfishness. We all have moral longings, but we need help finding what's the moral purpose of my life. If you have a moral purpose in your life, as Nietzsche has a famous saying, he who has a why can endure any how. If you know why you're put on this earth, then you can handle the setbacks. If you don't have your why, then the setbacks are going to be tough. And so another element of moral formation that we've sort of dropped the ball on.
David, just to go back to religion a little bit, just because that seems to be something that really was way more present in American life. I mean, we can look at the statistics, but also just in terms of in our day-to-day, the religion element that's missing, has that been supplanted in some sense by politics? And then particularly Donald Trump. And when I did focus groups in 2016 and then even in 2020 all over the country, and what you hear from a lot of Trump supporters who might not like his meanness, but they say, you know, he tells it like it is. And so a permission structure from the leader of a movement that allows people to be meaner ostensibly.
Yeah, well, at least, in every religion I know, the line between good and evil, as they say, runs down the middle of every human heart, that we all a little good, a little bad. But when you take politics as your religion, it gives you this moral landscape where I'm good and those other people are evil. It gives you a sense that I'm going to contribute to the neighborhood, but I don't have to serve the widow. I don't have to help my neighbor. I just have to be angry on behalf of the elites who are out to get me. And so politics has become like our substitute religion. Everything has turned political. The awards shows, late night comedies, sports, everything has become political because when you take away a real moral structure, then people are going to try to fill it with politics. And in a normal, healthy society, we have the politics of distribution. We argue about how high taxes should be, what the budget should be on, but we don't have that kind of politics anymore. We have a politics of recognition. People don't want policy victories. They just want to humiliate the other side and affirm my own people.
Contributing writer at The Atlantic, David Brooks, thank you very much for being on this morning. His latest piece,